Increasing violence in Libya as questions are raised about the challenges facing opposition fighters and the future of the Libyan leader. And now Muammar Gaddafi has launched a diplomatic initiative to negotiate an end to the ongoing fighting in the country. Will he succeed in his diplomatic battle? And what role could Greece, Turkey or Malta play to end the violence in Libya? This is Inside Story. Welcome to the program. Good to have you with us on this edition of Inside Story. I'm Darine Abu-Gaida. So after more than a month of fighting, the Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi has once again renewed diplomatic efforts seeking an end to the crisis. On Sunday, Libya's Deputy Foreign Minister, that's Abdel Ati Obeidi, he landed in Athens carrying a message to the Prime Minister of Greece from Gaddafi. Gaddafi's message to seek an end to the fighting. Well, that was followed by a trip to Turkey, and the envoy is also expected to continue on to Malta. Well, Italy's Foreign Minister, Franco Frattini, he's dismissed Abdel Ati Obeidi's message from Gaddafi as, quote, not credible, reiterating that Gaddafi had to leave power. At the same time, Italy has recognized the Libyan Opposition National Council as the only legitimate authority in the country. But the Libyan opposition is still refusing any kind of settlement, saying they will accept a UN-demanded ceasefire, and that's only if Gaddafi pulls his forces from all Libyan cities. Well, after meeting with the Libyan official, the Greek foreign minister, he said that his country reinforced the demands of the UN resolution. Listen.
We, Greece, underlined from the beginning that efforts for a diplomatic, political solution in Libya need to continue. The envoy said he would continue his contacts tomorrow in Turkey and then in Malta. We repeated, underlined, the clear message of the international community, full respect and implementation of the United Nations decisions, an immediate ceasefire, and an end to violence and hostilities, particularly against the civilian population of Libya.
So that's the Greek point of view, and in a further sign of willingness to negotiate an end to the war, it was reported that Gaddafi's son, that's Saif al-Islam, he's proposing a compromise resolution to the ongoing war. Well, that initiative includes the Libyan leader relinquishing power to a new constitutional democracy, and Saif was said to be suggesting a transition under his direction as a possible way out of the impasse between the regime in Tripoli and the rebel forces in Benghazi. Now, this move follows a visit to London on Friday by a key Gaddafi aide to explore possible exit strategies for the Libyan regime. To discuss all of this, we have our guests in London, Ashur Shamis. He's a Libyan journalist and writer. In Manchester, Dimitri Papadimitriou, a reader in European politics at the University of Manchester, and also again in London, Claire Spencer. She's the head of Middle East and North Africa program at Chatham House. Welcome all of you to this edition of Inside Story. Ashur Shamis, if I can start over with you in London. So we see these meetings that are going on between Gaddafi's envoy as well as European countries. But at the same time, as I was saying, Italy has said that the only way to resolve this conflict is for Gaddafi as well as his sons to go. But let me ask you, how can you reach a political settlement of any kind when countries are not willing to negotiate with Gaddafi because seemingly he does still have power?
Nor does he have credibility, of course. This is the last gasp of air that they are showing to the world. It is Saif al-Islam who wants to patch up something in order to save whatever there is of their so-called regime. No, there is no way of sitting with Gaddafi at these terms. He has lost credibility and he is losing power as well. So, you know, at the time when the coalition is taking momentum, when the whole process of the political process has taken momentum, a tremendous momentum against Gaddafi, he is now coming 3 or 4 weeks later. He could have done this a long time ago. How many ceasefires did we have? And all broken by Gaddafi himself. No, it is not possible, it's not practicable, it is not credible at all.
Okay, we'll talk about the role of the Opposition Council in just a moment. But Dimitri, over to you for just a moment, because I want to get the Greek point of view. Greece has said in the past that it has a moral duty to help the Libyans and the Libyan people. So is it exercising that moral duty at this point by trying to broker some sort of deal?
I think the Greek government is seeing itself as a mediator between the conflict between the Gaddafi regime and the rest of the world. Of course, Libya's relations with Greece go back a long time. Even back in the early 1980s, the Greek government was speaking to the Gaddafi regime, was trying to mediate a ceasefire in Chad between them and the French. So there have been open channels of communication between the Greek government and the Gaddafi regime, and I think the Greeks now are keen to show to the world and show to the Arab world and to the Europeans that they can act as honest brokers in this.
Okay, Claire, Dimitri, they're saying that the Greeks want to show themselves as an honest broker, but how much sway does Greece have with some of its more powerful European allies when it comes to the case in Libya? Because what we're seeing is divisions, if you like, among European countries over how to move forward with this political solution. I mean, we have a British team right now in Benghazi trying to talk to the Opposition Council. At the same time, we heard Italy there, as I was saying, Italy saying that there's no deal unless Gaddafi leaves power. So what does Greece do?
Well, I think as far as the rest of Europe's concerned, they're certainly looking for ways to bring this conflict to an end as soon as possible. As we heard from NATO this morning, the fear is that this could go on for months. Certainly in terms of the conflict on the ground, we've seen the stalemates which have taken place over the last week or so. So I think there is a keenness to see this finish, but there is a very difficult conundrum at the heart of this. As we've heard, the opposition, the Transitional National Council, have said that they will not enter into any discussions with the Gaddafis themselves. A precondition is that both Muammar Gaddafi and his sons will have to go before they'll even talk about a ceasefire, leave alone a political settlement. So I think the outside world, aware that public opinion in Europe may be, certainly over the coming weeks, wearing a bit thin if there's no progress on the ground, will be looking for ways out of this. But it's difficult to see if the idea is that Gaddafi is to leave Libya, which country, and certainly not Greece as a member of Europe, I fear, would actually accept him.
Well, good question. Can I ask you, I mean, which country do you think would accept him?
I've been trying hard to think of one, but I think even those, for example, in the immediate neighbourhood of Libya, who are not active participants in the conflict, and I'm thinking here of Algeria, obviously Tunisia and Egypt have got their own problems to deal with. The whole of the Arab League, at least nominally, is part of the coalition. Gaddafi is too much of a red-hot potato. The fear would be that if he were to leave the country, and again, it's not entirely clear that he would actually agree to leave Libya under any conditions, and certainly not as someone who's seen as a loser in any respect, that he wouldn't actually, if he were in exile somewhere, act as a pole of attraction to yet more opposition to whatever follows on in Libya afterwards. So I think it's something that very few people will be contemplating.
Sure, we see the deputy foreign minister of Libya. He went to Greece, as we said, and then on to Turkey. And this is not the first time that Turkey has tried to come up with a solution and broker a deal. But the question is, what do you think Gaddafi is likely to achieve with his deputy making these rounds? I mean, is this some sort of a PR stunt, a PR game, or do you think that at this point, considering what's happening in the ground, that Gaddafi is serious in trying to find an end to this war?
I think his options are very, very limited. He's playing for time. He's buying time to hope that there will be a break in the coalition, that there will be a break in the Libyan resistance, and he wins. He is trying to change a very bad losing battle to some sort of victory. But he won't, because the momentum, as I said, of the coalition, Western European countries, the council in Benghazi, is all gone too far to go back and look at this sort of offers. I agree, but a political settlement is much far better than any other settlement, and I agree that we should discuss this politically and come down, but not with Gaddafi. Gaddafi or any of his sons are out of the equation.
So who do you discuss
they are
this
not
with?
Suitable. They are not credible.
Who do you discuss this with then, if it's not with Gaddafi?
We discuss it with the Libyans amongst Libyans. Let Gaddafi out of there. Let Gaddafi somehow be completely eliminated from there, and then we can talk with the Libyan people. The Libyan people are waiting in Tripoli and in Misrata, in Zawiya. They are waiting for the council to contact them, and they are waiting to be free to be able to talk and express their opinion and what they want to do for a future Libya.
I just want to press you on this point. I just want to press you on this point, Ashur, before I go to Claire and Dimitri. But what can the Opposition Council really do at this point? Let's not forget, it's 1 month old, give or take. It's also, it's sitting there in Benghazi. How much power does it really have at this point to go forward with a political solution? It's only been recognized by 3 countries also around the world.
Yes, recognition is not really the issue here. A lot of countries have dealt with the council, and that is recognition. It is not a council, official council. It's not a permanent council. It's an interim council, and everybody knows that. It has representatives from the western parts of Libya as well as the eastern parts of Libya. It is accepted by all the Libyans. It has that credibility, and the recognition by the countries who have recognized it so far is very, very great. Is a good thing to have in their side. And the council is not really sitting in Benghazi. The council is thinking and making proposals and making contacts with various groups in Libya, inside and outside Libya, and that is giving it credibility and giving it stability as well.
Okay, Dimitri, if I can just come to you now. It's also reported, it was reported actually by the New York Times, that Gaddafi's son, Saif al-Islam, he's proposing that he steps in, his father steps down, all this on a road to a democracy, as was reported. Now, do you think that this is a serious and viable option that Saif al-Islam is proposing?
I don't think it's credible, no, but I think that it is important that everybody recognizes that the West and the coalition needs to retain open channels of communication with the regime. My understanding is that the regime can very clearly see now that the time is up, but they want to negotiate, I assume, an honorable exit. Even though they may not deserve such an honorable exit, I think it's in the interest of the Western alliance to negotiate with them. Even if they don't negotiate publicly, they need to have some channels of communication open with them to negotiate privately. And I think it is important that countries undertake the role of conduits between the West and the Libyans, so that Gaddafi can leave power as quickly as possible and we can move on to a transitional arrangement. I don't believe that the transitional arrangement would probably have his sons involved in it. They would probably like that to happen, but I think that it would be politically impossible to sustain.
What would a transitional arrangement? What would a transitional arrangement then look to you?
Well, I think that this is a really difficult question for the Western strategy here. They need to pick up somebody who can be presented as a credible alternative to what we have now. This is not easy. We know that Libya did not have a key opposition figure around whom people can unite. There is no Mandela there. There is no Václav Havel there. The West, in many ways, has to engineer a transitional regime, but has to do so very carefully so that it doesn't alienate the Western, the Arab public opinion along the way.
Claire, this offer that we were just referring to, Dimitri and myself, by Saif al-Islam, that his father steps down, do you think that that would even be acceptable to Muammar Gaddafi himself?
Well, this is not clear. I think the important question is how acceptable it is to the majority of Libyans. And here we have 2 problems. On the one hand, we have Saif al-Islam, who over the recent weeks has tried to present himself, certainly in an interview with Sharq al-Awsat, as being someone who was always pushing for reform but didn't really get anywhere in recent years. But he's also publicly been on television on the side of those on his father's camp, who said that they will fight to the last drop of blood, to the last man in Libya. So he's come out with two different stories in recent weeks. And so I think his credibility, and this is the word all of us are using, is severely damaged by this. But your second question really is whether Muammar Gaddafi is in on this and whether he would accept it. It could be a way that the sons are trying to manage the father, to engineer him an exit strategy, because he himself is refusing to contemplate it. So they're trying to set it up for him. And he presumably has agreed for Mr. Obeidi on his behalf to go to Greece. There are very strong family links between the Papandreous and Gaddafis, going back to the father of the current Prime Minister. But indeed, if he leaves the country, for example, just for the purposes of engaging directly in negotiations, this, of course, may well change things on the ground. And then a final element, of course, is what does the majority of opinion in Tripoli think? We have a few leakages, the few journalists on the ground have been able to hear that people are not entirely happy. But until we're in a situation where we can see Libyan opinion freely expressed, particularly in Tripoli where the bulk of the population live, it's very difficult to prejudge what the Libyans want. And I think that's what's important. It's not hear what the West wants. Of course, the West wants this to be resolved in a hurry, but it has to be done on Libyan terms, indeed, to be legitimate and credible.
Well, what we do know, I mean, the opinion that we do know, and this is according to the news that we're getting here at Al Jazeera, is that the Opposition Council says that Muammar Gaddafi has to go before any political solution is found. Ashur, if I can come back to you and just get your opinion on this proposal, this supposed proposal by Saif al-Islam al-Gaddafi.
Now, you see, look, the situation before these events erupted was a lack of confidence, was a crisis of confidence between Gaddafi and his family and between the rest of the Libyan people. This crisis of confidence has been in existence for 10, 20 years. The last 4 or 5 weeks showed us more of the Gaddafi's real character, and he came out in his true colors, him and Saif, which completely destroyed whatever confidence there might have been with the Libyans. So this is, you know, this is no-go area. Gaddafi and his children has got to move out. Now he's proposing, what he's proposing is like a succession arrangement, but that is refused by the Libyans even before these things have erupted. I think it's the last gasp. It's just a way of trying to turn a defeat to a victory by force.
Okay, so then how do you get to that point that you describe where Gaddafi just simply has to go? How does he go?
There has to be a third party or third parties to engineer his exit strategy. The West might help in this. The Arab countries might arrange something, and this is the way to do it. Convince him to go somewhere or to give himself up. Give himself up to the International Court of Justice, to Libyan justice, for instance, and do away with it. You can't have the Gaddafi element in Libya anymore. The Gaddafi element is non-acceptable to the Libyans, and it is more unacceptable now than it has ever been.
Claire, negotiating some sort of exit strategy for Gaddafi by his people, whether it's by his people or the Western powers, the international community, what kind of message do you think that could send out to other leaders, considering the many uprisings that we're seeing in the Arab world at this moment?
Well, we've just heard mention of the complicating factor of the International Criminal Court, and obviously there would have to be some revisiting of that, because obviously if Gaddafi is out of Libya, he could be liable to arrest under the provisions of UN Security Council 1970. I think the signal it would send could be very mixed, because I think what's happening elsewhere in the Middle East is different rulers and leaderships are distancing themselves from Gaddafi. Gaddafi. They're trying to mark out, whatever situation they're in with their own population, the difference between what's going on in Libya and the very different nature of the Gaddafi regime from their own. I'm not sure they've convinced their populations entirely, but as we've seen across the Middle East, there have been different reactions to protest movements, whether it's concessions over reforms or whether it's putting more money into the economy. And I think so long as there isn't a danger of a civil war type situation breaking out as in Libya, where there are two separate military forces, so long as these leaderships can maintain majority, if not 100% control of their security forces, I don't think they'll want to see any parallel at all.
Dimitri, I see you there nodding in agreement with what Claire is saying.
Well, I think that everybody here has to recognize that the regime has not collapsed entirely. It seems that with whatever means that the Gaddafi regime retains some control over a significant part of Libya, the danger for the Western alliance here and the international alliance here is that somehow Libya becomes de facto divided. And that, I think, would be possibly the worst of both worlds. The international community needs to do business with Gaddafi, needs to be resolute that he will no longer be part of the arrangements that will follow. It could, of course, negotiate that neither of his family will get involved, but somehow they need to account for the fact that Gaddafi has not entirely collapsed. I don't think that the Greek government and the Greek Prime Minister personally would be meeting with Gaddafi's envoys had he not had some previous encouragement or possible agreement by other European leaders to do so. I think that the Europeans recognize that at these final stages of the end game, they need to speak to the regime. They don't want to speak publicly, that's perfectly understandable, but somehow they need to reach a negotiated settlement, because quite simply they cannot afford to get bogged down into a long-drawn conflict there.
Ashur, we just have a few minutes remaining, but there's a very important point that I'd like to get your opinion on, actually, and it's this talk of arming the rebels that we hear about. Countries saying that they might, other countries standing against it. Whether they do or not, do you think that this could have any factor or any influence in any political solution going forward?
First of all, I would like to say that Greece is the Achilles heel of Europe, really. Greece is not credible as a mediator. He only went to Greece because Greece showed some sympathy towards his regime. They supplied him with oil, they supplied him with gasoline 2 weeks ago. Never mind. But on arming the rebels, I don't think really this is an issue. The rebels have shown restraint and did not go fighting for the sake of fighting. They let Gaddafi's troops, Gaddafi's militia, fight and kill civilians, because they have no other purpose for this fight. So the Libyans have organized themselves, they reorganized their army, and they are ready to receive weapons from anywhere. You know, they have the right to buy weapons anywhere in the open market.
Dimitri, go ahead. We just have 30 seconds, but I'll let you respond.
Okay, I think that there is a danger here that if the West floods Libya with more weapons, then the situation may become further destabilized. It is difficult to build an army within weeks, and that's something that most Western planners should keep very seriously into consideration.
Okay, thank you very much. Ashur Shamis, Dimitri Papadimitriou, Claire Spencer as well. I'd like to thank you for joining us on this edition of Inside Story. Appreciate your time. And to our viewers, of course, we always welcome your comments and your suggestions, and you can email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. From me and the team, goodbye for now.